Hi, I'm Barry Zwarenstein, and welcome to Navigate. Navigate is a conversation that really starts to look at all the aspects of the transitioning journey, and it's also based on my book, Which Way is Your Warrior Facing? I'm joined today by my wife, Christina Cesar.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me. And
Thank
the
you for
reason,
having me.
I think I'm blushing, but the reason she joined me today was the last three conversations we had were really around consolidating a core foundation to begin the transitioning process. And I pointed out that without consolidating a strong foundation to work from, to start to define your map and orientate your compass, that the odds of getting lost um, were significant. Today, I wanted to move beyond that and I wanted to look at relationships. The first thing I wanted to say was that the brain at war doesn't change when we simply move into civilian life. So we bring the war back home. We bring the consciousness and the workings of the brain back home. And I think what often happens is that veterans get back home and they bring the war into the household. And in many ways, the family members can begin to feel like the enemy in the presence of the veteran, whether the veteran is a male or female. And today I wanted to look at ways and tools and strategies and understandings to be able to effectively create change without it becoming a destructive process within the family. So, Chris, any thoughts?
Um, yeah, I think what comes to me is that something that we have talked many times and probably started years ago is about having some um, commitments that we would bring to this relationship. And hearing you talking, what comes to me is also maybe would be like protocols for relationships. And even thinking as a trained counselor, we when we come to meet a new client, we always have what we call the counseling agreement. So that outlines what that relationship is about, what is expected from both of us, from the counselor and the client. And I believe that that creates a safe container where that relationship can really flourish. And I think that's what comes to mind about the protocols we have talked before about creating that safe container that both partners can feel safe and understand each other's territory.
Thank you. So I hope that this presentation today in relationships can somehow have a positive impact for those of you that are struggling to navigate back into your families, as well as for those family members that are listening to this. Perhaps there's something here that can help you to bridge an effective communication into your veteran member, and both of you find a way to create a team as you all move forward together into creating change. Now, uh, in my book on chapter 13, and again, this book, contact me or look at Sarah Correll's Power of the Story for the ebook, and it can be used as a journal as well. So, to begin, I often found in working with veterans over the past 22 years as a psychologist that many partners of veterans struggle with the fact that they feel their partners have more intimate relationships with the veterans they are connected to. They see them in social gatherings and they really seem to be a lot more dynamic and connected and they're laughing. And back at home, they seem to be struggling and more withdrawn. And that's some of the things that we're going to be looking at today. I'm going to start off by starting to look at a number of the relationship lessons. Over the years of sitting with veterans, slowly these things began to emerge between us. And in many ways, the book consolidates conversations with these extraordinary people I've sat with for a very long time. The first lesson was, I call it keeping your safety on. And for the non-military members here, uh, all weapons have a safety switch, which means that you're never going to accidentally pull the trigger and it fires off in the wrong situation. So the concept of keeping your safety on is, as a veteran, what do you need to do to ensure that you don't impact or lose control or react out at the people you love around you? I want to start off with a bit of a story, which was a quote from a veteran. He said, "I don't know what happens every time my partner brings an issue or a concern to me about the relationship. I immediately feel like no matter what I do, I'm going to get judged or blamed and that it's always going to be my fault. I get irritated, frustrated, and worked up. I can see that I'm becoming abrupt and argumentative. As things escalate, I start to feel out of control to the point whether I either get out of the room or start becoming aggressive. They feel like the enemy to me at that point. We often just end up screaming at each other till one of us bursts into tears." And this is a classic case of when your safety is not on, things happen because the transition process is so complex that it's very difficult to always maintain a coherent emotional kind of process. So there's a couple of things here that I think may be able to help that you can think about. The first one is, as you enter any potentially tricky communication, just breathe. This will bring down the back of your brain. So you do not want to have a conversation or enter the territory around communication when you are upregulated. It's just a disaster waiting to happen. So the one thing you can actually do is take 5 minutes or 10 minutes out and just breathe, get back in your body, and then walk back in. I mean, Chris, what comes up for you with that in terms of
Mm.
how I've behaved over the years? Impeccably.
Um, yeah, I think from what you're saying, what comes to mind and reminds me is also to be able to communicate, and then the other person also having to, and I guess not understand, not always understand, but accept that you may not be in a time when you are open to talk. That is the best time. So I think taking responsibility for knowing when it is the best, time for you to talk. And if you don't feel like, look, it's not really what comes to mind is personally is I'm a big advocate for menstrual cycle awareness. So I know that certain times in my menstrual cycle, it is not a really good time to have, some kind of conversations. So then, but it's up to me then to be aware of that, where I am at, and then to communicate that to you in a way that is not rejecting as much as I can, but just to say, look, I'm not in a good space.
So, gentlemen, for those gentlemen that may be listening to this, it's not just about mapping out your transitional territory and learning to operate through it. You also need to understand and map out menstrual territory. And for that, I hope the women that are listening to this understand that as a man, understanding how to work with the menstrual territory and the changes and the different terrains that a woman will go through, it helps me to understand when I can have certain conversations and when I'm certainly not going to have a conversation at all, and how we can work within that space. So the core clue, this is not just about
Mhm.
transition, guys. This is also about learning your partner's internal territory, becoming
Mhm.
aware of it, understanding the signposts, the different territories you're going to be walking through, and how to do that and navigate through that effectively. So it's a
And
two-way. It's not just
vice
about,
versa,
yeah, it's
yeah.
not just about Chris understanding me, but it's
Yeah.
also about me understanding Chris. Okay, so there's a
Yeah,
useful hint.
it's yeah, vice versa, yeah, and you also letting me know like this is not a good time to talk, or this is something I don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Also, I found what is quite useful is that if we acknowledge that moving into the family is very difficult, veterans or current serving are away for extended periods of time. And in that process, their partners start to run the house in a way that works for them. The veteran or the current serving then comes back. And effectively, if they're not sensitive or aware of the patterns of management that happens in the home, it can be very, very disruptive. and it can create a lot of disagreement and conflict. Now, a thing I found very useful in working with veterans is to say, look, in a quiet, calm moment, go to your partner and explain that there are moments when you are going to be struggling. You are moments when you feel you are going to upregulate, you're a bit tense, you're a bit edgy, you're not sure why. And that when that happens, instead of acting it out in the communication situation, what you're going to do is take a time out, go to your room and create a stopgap by just breathing and using a number of tools. And in my book, there are a number of tools you can try out. And when you calm and back in your body and more able to think clearly, then after 10 or 15 minutes, you re enter the room. And the point is, it's not about timing out and not coming out of the room. It's about down regulating and then coming back and finishing off the conversation. And again, as we progress through this conversation, we will look at some of the tools that you can start to use once you re enter the room. One of the things I said in my book is when somebody brings something to you, don't see it as an attack. It's often not difficult when somebody says, you just always are argumentative. I'm tired of how irritated you are. And being able to stand and listen to that and sustain that without becoming impacted on and reactive. What I've said in the book is adopt the position of first wanting to listen so that you can understand. Ask your partner to tell you more about why they feel this way. Remember that the other person's story is real, but it may not be your experience, but your partner has the right to be listened to. And so, what I often say to the veterans is you need to learn to get out of your ambush zone and go to an OP. OP, for those that are not familiar, is an observation post, which is effectively a position where you've got distance from the ground. You can start to see things from a distance, and you can learn to communicate from that distance instead of having things up close in your face. I mean, what do you feel, Chris, in terms of
Mm.
sustaining the heat of communication when both people are getting quite upregulated?
Yes, yeah, yeah. I think if relate to what you said, it's, that thing that we say, it's easier said than done about, don't take things personally. That principle, that is quite useful in relationships, but I also know from personal experience that it's much easier said than done. To not think that, you are the problem, or yes, to make yourself guilt for whatever is happening to your partner. um and I guess that just comes, yeah, with more and more getting, to know yourself, and self-awareness, and being able, yes, to be in that relationship without taking things personally, because that is gonna trigger even more as well the listener as well as the person that who's speaking. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is,
Yeah.
some basic neuroscience of the brain is that the front of the brain is the capacity to think and plan and organize and communicate with respect. And the back of the brain, which is what I call the ambush zone, is when the world is just, it feels like an enemy. It's there to protect you, and you can be reactive and emotional. It's like being in a firefight.
Mm.
Everything is up close, and you're just trying to work on surviving. The responsibility that veterans have, and even the partners of veterans,
Mm.
is we need to be able to look at how we go from our ambush zones to the front of the brain where we can breathe. Because until we get here, we are simply incapable of having an organization, a communication where we can reach shared
Mm.
understandings through mutual respect and care and love. So critical to this whole process is you need to be willing to do work on and use daily tools and strategies like breathing tools, mindful meditation, body based tools that help you to clean out the residue of the stress of your day and the stress of the transitioning and the stress of integrating back into your families. You need to do it every single day. It's not about waiting until you're in the middle of a situation or a firefight with your partner. It's about doing it. You get up every day, you clean your barrel, you reduce the possibility of an AD, a runaway gun, or a stoppage. And so your responsibility is what are you going to take on board every day to do it rather than wait for the moments when you have to adjust and adapt and it's frankly too difficult. Um, the second lesson is one I call respect. And as a veteran said, there are times when I look into his eyes when we're having a tricky discussion, and all I see is hate or coldness. It's like if I would just disappear, he'd be happy. I see no care for how I feel. It's exhausting. Everything is about his needs and his difficulties from the war. But what about me? And what I say here is that if your anger, anxiety, and reactivity are not within your control, then ask for help to get you to the point of becoming more on top of your feelings. Your partner is no different from the folk you operated with or those who outranked you. Unless your partner is abusive towards you, they have earned the right to be respected. Veterans often bring the war back home, resulting in the family walking on eggshells around them. If your partner has demonstrated care and a willingness to love and support you, you also need to understand how challenging it can be to care for you as a veteran. As much as you struggle, so do the others in your life. They have earned the right to respect. Your responsibility is to use the tools the professionals and others have given you and to teach you to get from point A to point B in a different way. Every day, I find very useful is wake up and look at the person lying next to you. Do the same thing when you head to sleep at night. Think about what this person has brought into your life and the qualities you value in them. Think about the good times you had, and while you're holding and feeling the memories and emotions, just breathe gently in and out. So it's little tools of mindfulness, self-compassion, and gratitude
Mm.
that can keep and regulate your brain into the realities of the situation rather than getting stuck into the impacts of the war that still live within your body. I mean, what is your sense here?
Mm. Yes. I think as you are saying, it what comes to me is um like a little bit more in a general way that people who have experienced trauma, um that sometimes it feels like that life would be much easier on our own, um because it can be, yeah, quite painful, because if we get our wounds activated all the time, it can be exhausting and can be and can feel threatening. And so sometimes, yeah, like we feel like, oh, I just want to be left alone. But I guess, you know from our own experience, and I can see now that how precious it is, and valuable to go through this, what we call the healing journey together. But sometimes it can be actually more difficult, because even a gesture of kindness from a partner can actually activate pain instead of gratitude, if it is something that you actually didn't have much in your life. It activates first your thinking around, I never had that, instead of looking at, I have this now. So yeah, it can, some at times it can be more challenging. However, I can, only say from my personal experience and from knowing from other people's experiences as well, that um it can be, yeah, greatly enriching to have someone else with you. And actually the healing happens in a different way, and maybe even in a quicker way, but not is not always easy.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that because what comes to mind is, you know, I don't know if I mentioned, I'm a combat veteran from the Rhodesian Bush War in the 70s. So my generation of the kind of Vietnam tail end generation, and there was very little help or support, and we just bombshelled out into life and then tried to navigate our way without a map or a compass. And a lot of us, including myself, made an awful mess of many things. In my case, I learned to become comfortable with discomfort. So I was running marathons and ultra marathons, and even several years ago, I was still running in extreme heat till I injured myself because in discomfort, I found comfort. Now, the thing is, I'm I know Chris has often, I know when Chris shows care for a long time, it was quite uncomfortable because instead of feeling it as care, it kind of brought up in my body how little care I'd allow to come in because it echoed my grief and my loss. And I know that certainly I can only speak for myself as a man. I'm very good with discomfort. I'm very good with being hard and resilient
And going it alone.
and go, yeah, thank you for sharing that publicly, and going it and definitely going it alone.
Mm.
But to actually allow support is profoundly uncomfortable for me, and at times it almost felt quite invasive. And I don't think we talk about these things a lot. And these are certainly things that transitioning veterans and their partners back home and families are going to be meeting. They
Mm.
are going to be meeting it. And I've
Yeah.
often used to say to guys, and I said to a lot of the folk I've sat with, is when you find the most loving relationship and you begin it, sometimes the first thing that comes up is grief rather than this feeling of love in your body.
Yes.
Because love opens our hearts, and when our hearts open, we open to what we've lost and what we've never had. And, you know, all I can tell you personally to all of you listening to that is as a veteran and as a man, and when you scrape away everything, what's always left and consistent between all of us is grief.
Mm.
And that the experience of love and care of when someone puts their arms around us, the first thing we feel is this deep sadness, and we are not good with grief. We become profoundly uncomfortable and we often want to push away.
Mm.
So just be aware of that as you're navigating into your family territory.
Yeah.
You know, talking about respect, actually, what came up to me
Mm.
was I was working with a veteran who was anything but respectful. And I said to him, when you were operating in Afghanistan and the women of the village ran out, and although you couldn't speak their language, you clearly understood that what they were saying to you was anything but polite. Um, did you shoot them? And they go, no, of course not. Why? Why would I want to do that? And then I said to the bloke, I said, so when you're at home and your wife is agitated and frustrated and angry with you, why do you shoot your mouth off at her? Because in many ways, what you're doing is it's the verbal equivalent of shooting someone. And he went, oh, and joining the dots between operational strengths and understandings and what's going on in the family connected him to the point where he went, you spot on, and I understand that. And at that point, he was willing to create change. So to move on to lesson three,
Mm.
what links into that is the whole concept of self-control. Because everything we're talking about, Chris and I are talking about today, is about self-control. It's like when you have a weapon, you have a responsibility for self-control around how you use that weapon, when you use it, but also how you care for it.
Mm.
So self-control is critical. If you don't have that and you can't get it, then you need to really get some help. But there are ways that you can start to begin with and also use your training to remember that it's wired into your body.
Mm.
So it's not something new. You just have to go back and fetch who you were and learn to transfer it and adjust and adapt it into your new territory. So a veteran said to me, I always try to go in with good intentions. But as soon as things crank up, I just lose self control. I hate seeing myself like this. I used to stay calm and focused in all situations when on operations. My guys always commented on how safe they felt around me because they trusted me. I felt good about myself. Now I see myself getting dismissive, aggressive, and cold, and I see fear in my partner's eyes. And you know, to the partners of veterans, we are all wired to protect, at the core level of willing to put our lives aside for another human being. So when we see our bodies and our brains acting out at the people we love and the people we know we are there to protect and care for, the impact is huge. And the impact on the veteran is to actually feel that everyone else would be better off without you. Now, that's a slippery slide into 40 odd people that choose not to live every day. And we don't want to go there. And this is one of the things that we can change is how we don't get to the point of feeling as if others would be better off without us, and how, as partners, you can start to communicate with your veterans to help them understand that they are loved and they are needed, that you understand why they are struggling with what they are doing, with what they're experiencing. But between the two of you, you can construct something where, as a team, you start to navigate and patrol through this, even if it needs support.
Hmm.
I mean, I know there are times I can wake up and it's like a cold wind has descended on my soul.
Hmm.
And I have a choice as to whether I act that out at that point or I find a different way of managing it.
Yes, yeah, that's a tough one. I think two things you said, maybe even previously, that came to me, but might relate to this in somehow. Um, well, first, the self-control. I feel that in a way, I can talk about you because I
Yeah,
have, close. But if I feel like your training was all about self-control and discernment, and being, yeah, in being control of yourself, your body, like, the conditions you were have to endure, like in terms even, a full night walking, not sleeping. It's like you had to overrun your own instincts.
yeah,
So it feels that that comes, in a way, easy to you, but it's just a different territory and different people around you.
yeah,
Um, but, and also, I guess that is around practice as well, that you have your own rituals that work for you. And I think that's also something that came to me, is about trying to understand as much as I can. And of course, I would need your help to help me understand. I don't have a crystal ball, as sometimes we used to think, it's one of us have a crystal ball in a relationship. But um, what are your ways to cope?
mm, mm,
Like you talked about the running.
mm,
Um, and it took me a little while to understand that, going for a run in a 40 degrees heat, it was actually your way to cope, although I
yeah.
could say it could be slightly not that healthy
It's,
because of the danger of a heat stroke.
are you saying I'm old?
No, no,
I
no.
don't suggest, well, I'm old and
Everyone can have a
yeah.
heat stroke,
Well,
including me.
running at 67, running in extreme heat is,
Yes.
I acknowledge, verging on
Yeah.
stupidity. Yeah,
But I also had to accept that running was a core ritual for you to process, to release, to find your center, your core again, to find your center again. And then you would, bring that back to the relationship.
yeah,
So I had to understand what were your ways to cope, even certain behaviors, um, and find a way that I could be okay with that as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
I think one the core thing you said for me is also, as partners, I guess both partners need to also understand what abuse means,
yeah,
what abusive behaviors, what they look like,
yeah,
because that's a core thing that, it's not okay. But if that is not the case, then there is room for some compassion around, each
yeah,
other's behavior that may not be always what I wanted.
yeah.
um but I can find some, compassion around it and understanding. Yeah.
And so, the veterans, and thanks, Chris. I mean, you
Mm.
raised some really good points. And for the veterans listening out there, the universe gave us 2 feet, and it's called the law of 2 feet, which means when you are not coping, turn around, go somewhere else, and do what you need to do to get back in yourself and then come back out. And the law of 2 feet means you can walk, you can move, and you can time out and go from your ambush zone into your OP by using the tools that you use every day so they become familiar to you and your body. That's the first thing. The second thing is many of us get into extreme sports because what it does is we feel it heals and it damps down and resolves the tightness and the pain, the grief, the anger, the loss, and all those very hard emotions that live within the bodies and the hearts of veterans. Well, what I realized one day in a run in the mountains was that when we run, there are these wolves. If we see the wolves as a metaphor for all the voices, the pain, the grief, the losses of our past, they run behind us at about 30 meters. No matter how hard you want to run, no matter how long you want to run, how fast or slow you run, they maintain a distance of 30 meters. You can never, ever run away from them. And there will come a time where you will have to stop, and at that point, they circle you and then they wait. And what I always say is it's better to run into the change and the healing you need rather than wait for it to run into you. Because when it runs into you, it's hard work. Because that means you've reached the end of yourself and then you start to wear away thin very quickly. And it can be a very painful and a dark space. And so I learned, it was actually quite a hard lesson where somebody said to me one day when I was talking about running ultra marathons, and they said to me, I have a question to ask. And I went, yep. And they said, so what are you running away from? And I must admit, my first thought was probably quite violent because I felt that quite an intrusive question. But as I sat with it, I realized that they were right, that I was running away from, and that what I learned that I needed to learn to do was the run into and really hold and feel and heal rather than run away from. So, just some thoughts for you guys to think about. The fourth lesson is to clarify, which is always really important. You know, often what we think is understandable is not really received or understood by the person we're saying it to. There are funny ways in which, when we're stuck in grief and pain and anger, what comes out can be experienced in a very different way. So I remember veterans saying, I remember when my wife used to start a discussion about how unsupported she was feeling. I immediately used to get fired up. I was doing everything I could to hold part-time work. I'd been trying to cut down on my drinking and had been seeing a counselor. The more defensive I became, the more frustrated she would get. It was all downhill from there. It was only when I realized that it was not about justifying or defending my position, but rather asking for more information and allowing her to talk, that we began to make progress. And what I say is that as a veteran, you never rushed into any unmapped territory. You took time to observe, look at a map, and identify points of risk. So why rush in blindly into a conversation? Ask for more information. Ask for clarification. Use questions such as, can you tell me more about what you're saying? Can you give me some examples of what you see me doing? What would it look like for you to see me as being more supportive? The very asking of these questions allows the other person an experience of being listened to. It also creates a stopgap for you to regroup, breathe, and ground yourself. Often, as soon as we feel listened to, we are more likely to feel supported. In that case, mission achieved. And I know that, I mean, Chris, what's it like in those rare moments when you feel I'm listening to you?
I think the word that comes to me is actually connection.
Yeah,
Um, and we've talked about that many times. And I think also there is a way that I don't know if I can generalize this much, but that's what it comes to mind now. But I know my brain, let's say I'm gonna just use myself, not women in general, but my brain, um, it's 99% of the time is not wanting a solution from someone else. When I'm struggling with something, what I really need is just to be listened to have someone there, like to listen, to reflect, or to help me even go deeper into my own reflection. And that happens with questions or even just with a validation of what I'm feeling.
yeah,
So, and I think that's the difference that um it feels like, for example, with you, let's also use just us, not men in general. But like, sometimes if I come with something with you, you'll come back with a solution.
do I?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels like that you feel pressured to give me a solution that
Correct.
it
Yeah.
may it something that touches in you that you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to have the answer, I have to have the solution, or I have to help her because it's my role, um, and I need to do for her, or whatever it is, but it's not that. So what I just need, it's just a kind presence there with me as I struggle through my own things. So I think that's what comes to me, that the
Yeah.
difference, that I'm not sure if it's generalized or not, but in between us, that's what came up around that.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think you probably raised one of the core protocols in learning to navigate into effective relationships. And veterans, and I can't speak for women, but as men, we driven to problem solve continually. We always think that our role is to find solutions, and if we're just listening, we're not being effective. We're not doing anything, so we're useless.
Yeah.
And the problem is, the more we try and fix, the more agitated our partners are going to become. And so learning to listen is learning to move into a place of stillness, learning to shut down the clutter in your head that's screaming at you to find solutions so they can change and get on with it. It's not going to work like that. I know that certainly with the veterans I've sat with, we work really hard. We're finding solutions, we're getting out there, but these tools don't work in our intimate relationships. Listening is probably one of the most powerful things we can do. And it's not a doing thing, it's a being thing. It's a presence where we sit in our bodies and we just allow space for our partners to communicate with us. And we can say things like, that must not be easy for you. I hear that you're struggling. Tell me more. And you have to be able to leap over that sense of, I'm doing nothing, to understanding that just in doing the nothing, you are doing so much already.
Mm.
Okay, so I think that's a really important one for those of you navigating back into your families, is that it's not always about finding solutions. It's just about being. And the good thing is that when you listen, the process slows down, which means you can listen, you can still be really uptight inside, but while you're listening, you can be breathing and you can be down regulating and getting yourself back into your body. So the very act of listening also creates a stopgap for you to calm down and be more present. Because you can listen with very cold eyes. But as you ground yourself, you learn to listen with warmer eyes. And guys, and all of you as veterans, if you're listening with anger in your heart, it's in your eyes. And you
Mm.
may look like you're listening, but your partner's going to see coldness.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to get it. Listening's not a technical thing. Listening is a quality of being.
Yeah.
I often used to say to veterans in the good old days, just listen, even in your brain, if you're going bitch, 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 just try
No,
and
that
listen.
does not
But
that's
yeah,
not gonna
I
work.
want to reframe that, and I realize, and I want to apologize to maybe 10 years of veterans where I
That
suggested
just
this
said that,
protocol.
yeah, because the energy
Yeah,
that
so,
comes
yeah,
through the eyes is bitch, bitch, bitch. Yeah.
I
Like
apologize. Yeah,
when I ask you, is everything okay? Are you okay?
yeah,
Yes, I'm
yeah,
fine.
because I am
So
fine.
the words say one thing, but the energy is
Yeah,
completely different, and we
yeah,
can totally feel that.
yeah.
And
So,
vice versa, you
yeah,
also
yeah.
do.
Apologies to all those veterans I messed with. But I think remember, if you're not doing something well, time out. Okay.
That's the first thing.
Go into your OP
And communicate
and
as well.
communicate. And it's a shared agreement before the
Yeah.
situation hits the fan. And it's an agreement which, in your calm moments, I would say to Chris, look, there are
I
going to be
need to come
moments I'm not
out.
going to deal with stuff and I'm not doing well. I'm going to time out to 10 minutes to my room or go outside. And I will be back in those 10 or 15 minutes. And we will continue from there.
Or can we, schedule, yeah, like for
Yeah.
tomorrow, or leave it for
Yeah.
tomorrow. Like one thing that, yeah, like when it just reminds me of a book I was reading yesterday that it was actually directed to kids, but it's a really good example of what we are talking about. It's called a technique called connect and redirect.
Mhm.
So if you can see someone is really struggling, and the language that the author uses is like it is on emotional flood. So their right side of their brain is completely gone wild. So they can't even connect to the left, which is the reasoning side. So they can't make sense and they can't be reasonable in their communication or behavior. If you come in and try to reason, it's just going to make it worse and more frustrated,
Yeah.
because they are themselves already trying to get the emotion under control, and they can't. So if you come in and try to do solution, problem solve or solution focus, then that's just going to put even more fire, yes, to the heat. So that they say connect and redirect. So the connect is the part that you actually connect to the emotion. So you can validate something simple as, I can see this now, right now, is really hard for you, or I can see that this really activated you, or you are really struggling to to hold things together right now. So what do you need to do right now for yourself? Because we are talking about adults, so it's different from how you do as a kid. So what you need to do for yourself, and how about we have them this conversation tomorrow or something like that. And then when you are, both calmer and clearer, then you can problem solve together, even like,
Yeah.
if it's in regards to the relationship, then you got to problem solve together and see what would work for both.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
points.
Yeah.
And I think what that leads into is, for you veterans out there, is controlling your arc of fire. For those non-veterans, an arc of fire is in any operation and in contacts, everybody has a designated area in which they control their fire. And that means you do not shoot people left or right. And part of the responsibility that you have is that your family should not be in your arc of fire. You need to understand that as much as you are struggling, as much as you are carrying pain and grief, your family should not be in your arc of fire. So a veteran said to me, he said, there were so many moments when I just used to lose it. I'd go off at my family and friends while driving on the road and at my co-workers. I was like a runaway gun, just shooting my mouth off at anything and everyone. And what I say is that arcs of fire are there for the sole purpose of not placing others at risk. Um, it's critical to identify your boundaries and not allow yourself to be abused or used. And the partners of veterans, you are not there to be abused or used. Okay, so you do not need to cop abuse. That's not part of the deal. Um, these behaviors and the setting and communication of limits are well within your arcs of fire. Start to identify these arcs in all situations. Identify who and what fits into the arc and what is outside of it. And as I said, your children and your partners are outside of your arc of fire. Learn to step back from what is outside of your area of responsibility. Learn to communicate effectively and clearly with what falls within your area of influence. Learn tools to regulate your emotions. Remember, cock, hook, and look. Guys, remember, when a round got caught in the barrel, it's a cock, hook, and look. It's the same thing. Stop, look, take time, identify what's happening, then create effective action forward. So you can take a moment, you can breathe, and you can create a space between the situation as you perceive it and your triggered reaction. Remember that you are entitled to feel what you want, but you are responsible for what you do with those feelings. Maintaining arcs of fire takes discipline and an awareness of others around you. As I said, your spouse, children, friends, and others are not part of your arc of fire. They are not the enemy. And, saying all of this, please, in no ways do I feel that any of these changes is difficult. These are things that take a lot of work. They really do.
You mean
Just,
easy?
yeah,
Easy.
maintaining your arc of fire,
It's not
respect,
easy. Yeah.
self-control, effective
It's an
communication.
everyday
Every day. Yeah,
practice. Yeah, it's
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. It feels like we never quite master it, but we get better at it. Yeah.
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 And I mean, if you're not prepared to do
A
that work,
lifetime work.
yeah, and it is a lifetime work. I mean, we still work
Mm.
at things. Remember that as veterans, we carry the wounds and the pain, some of it we carry till the day we die. And we have those moments where, for whatever reason, there's nothing even around us that it seems as if it triggers it. But we just go to a bit of a dark or bleak or sad or grief-driven space. And in that place, we're not at our best because we're internally driven as we're touching things that are still painful for ourselves. But you have a responsibility to look at what you do when you are in that space. Okay, lecture for the day. Um, Relationship 6 is what I call the accidental discharge, is when you shoot your mouth off and you're not good to anyone around you. And the veteran said, there was a moment sitting around the table with my family when I lost it. The kids were fighting and my wife was exhausted and was screaming at them and me to sort it out. The next thing I knew, I had a knife at her throat and threatened to kill the children unless they shut up. There was this pause. It felt like a picture frozen in time. All I could see was the sheer fear in my wife and my children's eyes. They were looking at me as if I was a monster. It was like I had gone into automatic. And this one I treat really
Mm.
seriously because these kind of accidental discharges when you lose control are potentially life-threatening situations. And part of taking responsibility is at that point is recognizing maybe you need to get help and support. You're not going to be able to do this on your own. And part of the strength of creating change and healing is knowing when you're not going to be the locus and center of your own change and healing, that you're going to need others to walk with you.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I say you are a fine veteran whose brain struggled to differentiate between war and civilian life. I've said that too many traumatized veterans bring the war home with them. The family becomes hypervigilant and walk on eggshells. Those you love are no different from the soldiers you operated with.
Mm.
And I know a partner of a veteran once said that, we're up till 11 o'clock at night, checking all the doors. We've got allocated times where we have to patrol. There are weapons all over the house. We make sure that windows are barred. When we bring the war back home, we literally place our loved ones in a situation where they now become hypervigilant. They become veterans of what we bring home and combat veterans of what we bring home. So we pass the pain forward, and we have an obligation to ensure that that doesn't happen. So if you are having accidental discharges and you are feeling out of control, please get help.
Mm. I just want to say that that part is also tricky, I think, to ask for help, to
Not easy.
no, to
Speaking from experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
to identify first that we can't do it alone. It can bring a lot of shame, it can bring a lot of fear, fear of judgment. That was my biggest one before I went to therapy myself. Um, and yeah, it's just like this paralyzing sometimes fear of being judged,
Mm.
and also fear of, yeah, feeling the impotent. I don't know if that's the correct word, but that I can't, how come I can't do this myself? I can read all the books that are available, on self-help and things, but then yeah, I still need help from another human being. And that is the difference.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was for me at least. So, but it's not an easy step to take.
No.
So it's not that, oh yeah, I wake up today, oh, I need help, I'm just gonna go straight there. It's not a straight journey like that.
No, no, there's
No,
a lot of resistance
there
sometimes
is.
because, as
Yeah.
I said, I think none of us want to get too close to the pain and the grief. We
Mm,
don't. It's deeply uncomfortable.
yeah.
And the last lesson is what I call, and I did touch on this, is keeping your barrel clean. And for non-veterans, the importance of cleaning your weapon every single day and sometimes more than once a day is critical. You clean and oil the working parts, and then you drop oil cloth down with a weight, and it pulls it through the barrel and cleans the barrel. Now, as veterans, we know how to maintain and clean our weapon every single day. It becomes part of our daily discipline because the lives of ourselves and others around us depend on weapon functionality. Well, so too in civilian world, do you need to know what you need to do to be able to clean your weapon every day? It's not about waiting for a situation to hit the wall to work it out. It's about doing it every single day, whether you need to or not. Now, what I work hard with a lot of the people I sit with very quickly is identifying what are you willing to do. It could be 5 minutes of box breathing, a cold shower, a walk around the block, do some stretching exercises. And there's various other body-based modalities that we work on. So when they walk away, they've got 15 minutes that is within their area of their zone of ability that they commit to doing every single day, 7 days a week. And they do it whether they need to or not, because what happens is when we stop doing the things that support us to be more human and present, there's a residue that slowly gathers in our body, slowly. And it's only after it builds up that we start to feel slightly on edge. Then we start to feel slightly more irritable. Then we start to feel a little bit more reactive. And then eventually we're out of control. And at that point, there's damage. And to always have to wake up after damage, you've only got so many brownie points before that doesn't work anymore.
Mm.
So daily pull-throughs are absolutely critical. So
Can I say something?
yeah, please go for it.
I would say that it not just for the partner that are more, we could say clearly, experiencing the effects of have been in a war or any kind of other operation, but also for the partner. So for in our case, for myself as well, I also realize that I also need my own, you call your discipline, I call my self-care. So so I need my self-care rituals as well. And especially like if you are in a situation that for a moment in time your partner is needing a lot of support from you, I just would like to highlight that how important it is also that you have your own support. So as you are trying to, as you are supporting them during that time, then you also need to think who is supporting you. So then we can, like you can have that, if we think about like a chain of support, that
Yeah.
no one is doing it actually alone, because it's actually something, I don't think so we can do it alone. It might be too strong, as I'm saying, but I don't think so we can do it alone. So yeah, for the partners of veterans out there, I just really would like to also say that it's not about just supporting them, but it's also he's supporting you, so then you can support them.
So it's the whole thing is about tribe, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about tribe because really in tribe we find so much healing, connection, and belonging.
Mm.
And tribe is also about not just the people we're surrounded by, but it's also the professionals that walk with us on the way through to healing. So I'd like to finish off with
Hmm.
the letter.
Yes, that's
Um,
a good idea.
I found personally that I find it quite difficult to say I'm feeling vulnerable. In fact, I still don't do that, do
Mm-mm.
I? Okay. Work in progress. So, guys, I've got a lot of years on me, and if I'm still struggling, well, welcome to the journey. But work in progress. And so what I started doing was we would work out a letter that the veteran could hand to his wife. It was a template, and they could rewrite it as they wished, and then hand it over, and then the conversation could begin. The letter would say what they wanted to say but couldn't say. So I probably could rewrite this letter now because I wrote it many years ago, but it's a rough draft. It's in the book. Again, just to point out that Sarah Coral can give you details about how to get the ebook. Um, and it's all in there, but I'm going to read the letter now, and I will read that to my wife. All
Mm.
right. So let's do this properly.
Yeah.
And for this section, if you want to, what you can do is bring your partner into this. You can just fast forward to this and go, I want you to hear the letter.
Mm.
Okay. So, Chris,
Yeah.
even though too much of where I've been and what I've seen cannot be spoken, and even though my present feels like such a struggle at times, both for you and me, I remain a proud veteran who still believes in loyalty, and who's willing to put my life on the line for others. Many times, it felt as if my brain remained on the battlefield. The sound of a car backfiring became the enemy coming in contact with me. Hitting the ground may have been a joke to you and others, but it was life and death to me. The flashbacks felt too real, and every corner was a potential ambush. I know that insisting I sit in restaurants with my back against the wall was difficult for you to understand, or that trying to talk to me in shopping centers when I was scanning everyone walking past was irritating. I know that at times you felt that after all these years I should have moved on. I wish things were that simple, as I was desperate to move on. But every day was another day at war, of being vigilant and of struggling with depression, stress, anxiety, grief, and trauma. For me, there has been no escape. My nights are full of nightmares, and my days find me wanting to escape to safety and silence. I've not given the best of myself to you all, and I've never rested well with this. I know you've struggled with the bonds I still have with the soldiers I served, and that at times this bond has felt more connected than the bond I have with you. I know you felt frustrated by my refusal to talk about that time of my life. It's not that I don't want to share, it's that I can't. There are things I've never talked about and that haunt me every day of my life. These are memories that I don't even share with other veterans. But I also have memories that I can't share with anyone who hasn't been there. I've tried to talk to civilians in the past, but the look in their eyes showed me how complex, in fact impossible, it was for them to understand me. I know my silence has hurt you, and for that I am sorry. It isn't personal. I know you've said that you are willing to listen, and I've been grateful for that. But these are stories that I cannot share with you, so please understand. At times, it feels as if I have a room full of memories that I've locked away not only from others but from myself. They still affect my mood, my sleep, and ability to connect with others. But I know and feel that my deepest fear is that if I ever begin to open this box, I wouldn't be able to control what would come out. It's hard enough just dealing with the surface of it all. I promise you that I will do whatever it takes to become a better partner, parent, and friend. I know that the ways I've tried to cope with the memories and experiences haven't served me and others well. I'm willing to look at what I can do to heal and find more peace. Please try not to judge or push me into change. It's hard enough for me to begin to open up to my suffering, grief, and anger. My moods have never been easy for you. I have times when I feel on edge for no apparent reason or feel down. Again, this is not personal. What I need is some time and space just to be alone to catch my breath. I'm grateful for the years in which you stood by me and done your very best to support me, even when I behaved in ways that made life difficult for you. They say there is no such thing as an unwounded warrior. We were young then and we felt immortal. We never understood the price we would eventually pay for everything we did, saw, and experienced. Age has not diminished the pain. If anything, the pain has only become more intense, but I am willing to change. And I want to say, guys, in conclusion, that your commitment to change must be 100%. It's not going to come easy, but then, learning to fight a war and operate and stay alive and deal with the rigors and challenges of it is not easy either. But you're on a different battlefield now. You're on a battle to rescue the wonderful parts of who you are as a veteran, heal the wounded parts, and bring those back and combine them into this extraordinary individual and veteran, and bring that to the people you love and the friendships and the relationships you choose to enjoy. I want to thank my wife for being a part of this. As you can see, we first thought we'd go on separate computers and then discovered that sitting next to us, there was an echo. We've had this microphone bouncing around between us, so it's slightly messy and all over the place, but
And he only told me last night,
yeah,
probably, that
last night.
would be good to
Yeah,
do this together.
yeah.
So no preparation either.
So this is roughshod and raw, but I hope that something in what we have shared you will take away, and it can have an impact on your life. You know, my whole approach to everything I do with veterans and the book I wrote and the 22 years of sitting with extraordinary people is that I want to create change, even if it's one leaf on a tree at a time in a forest. And that slowly, if I can do what I can to create change, as veterans and as the partners of veterans, you will experience a peace which my generation didn't. You know, we suffered because there was so little awareness, and we carried that suffering and the damage into so much of our lives. So I hope in some ways that Chris and I have added to your journey. And I personally can say that a lot of who I am today is because the last 10 years of my life, I've been in a deeply loving relationship. The first 60 were at war in a variety of ways, but that's a story for another time. So thank you, Chris, for everything, for what you brought to my life. And I hope that what you shared today, as well as a partner of a veteran, can have an extraordinary impact on those that may choose to listen to this. Right. So thank you all.
Yes,
And
thank
I'll be
you.
back as
Yeah.
normal next week. Hope to join. Hope you can find time to join me then.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye for now.
How do you
And